Hello and welcome to episode 38 and this week's AfterMaths episode of the Primary Maths podcast, the show where we talk all things primary maths. With me, John Cripwell.
And me, Becky Brown.
How are you this week, Becky?
I'm very well, thank you, John. Things at school have started hotting up for Christmas. You know that feeling when we start thinking about Christingles and songs and carols and things. So there's a nice festive feel in school this week, which is nice.
Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it? We had my youngest daughter's Christmas carol concert at the cathedral this week on Monday evening for her school, which is the school that I used to work at. So this was the first year in, I think we've probably been doing it, or the school have been doing it about 8 or 9 years. I was on the other side of the curtain, as it were, just sat in the audience, not having to worry about which children were facing which way, who was singing, who was pulling faces at the parents, or trying to get the music to start at the right time or anything like that. I just got to sit back and enjoy it, and it was lovely and very festive, and yeah, definitely felt very Christmassy after going to watch that. Yeah, so
good.
That was good.
Yeah, I think once you've been a teacher, I think you do go to school events with a slightly different eye, don't you? You're watching the event,
I went
but you're
much more relaxed, Becky. That was the point.
Yes.
I didn't have to worry about a thing. I got my child there, and that was it. Other than that, I just had to sit back and enjoy. Yeah. So no, it was really, really lovely. And like you say, when you know the work that goes into it as well, I think you can appreciate it, can't you?
Definitely, yeah.
But yeah, she spent the week pretty much walking to and from town, which is, I think they worked it out as a 6-kilometre walk, which when you're in year 3, little legs, that's, so it's quite a trek, isn't it? So going down for rehearsals and then a visit to the museum, see the Egyptian mummy that we've got in Derby Museum. That's the highlight of Derby, that and the hippo skeleton, also in the museum, the ancient hippo skeleton.
Love it.
Yeah, exactly. I should be on the Derby tourist board after this episode, I think. So anyway, none of that is particularly mathsy. So what are we talking about this week, Becky?
Well, we've had our Spotify Wrapped stats through for the podcast this week, and they're very exciting. Santander also published a report on financial education recently with some very interesting outcomes, so we'll discuss those. And in Tuesday's episode, you interviewed Patrick Ranulph to talk about rebuilding teacher confidence in maths and how his own experience shaped his goal to support others. So we'll also share our key takeaways from that interview.
Absolutely. And just a quick reminder, you can get in touch with the show by emailing primarymathspodcast@twinkle.co.uk without an E, or leaving us a comment or a DM on pretty much any of the social media platforms, which is exactly what happened this week, Becky, after I posted a clip from last week's AfterMaths episode where we were talking about misuses of maths and particularly your gripes with probability and how it's used. So we had a comment on that video from Filter Coffee. I believe their name may be Phil, the way that they've spelt filter. See what they did there. And they said, so there's a bit I struggle with to get within this. I understand that an independent event from previous roles can't influence the next event, but it also feels totally at odds with the understanding that if I flip a coin 1,000 times, the result is more likely to be around 50-50 on average. And the larger the sample size, the closer it gets to 50-50. So it feels, I think what Filter Coffee is getting at here is that if we flip a coin 1,000 times, we know it's going to be roughly 500 heads, 500 tails, give or take. That's what we would expect from a mathematical modelling sort of point of view.
Yeah. I think that's why it's got wrong so many times. I think it's because we're looking at two different things and they don't necessarily match up with each other. And it can be difficult to get your head around because it's actually two separate things we're looking at. We're looking at short-term independence. So we know that if we flip a coin, there is an equal chance of getting heads and tails, even if you've done it 1,000 times and it's got lots and lots of heads up to number 999. The 1,000th flip will still be 50-50 chance of heads or tails. But we're also talking about long-term averages and binomial distribution and thinking about how in a sequence, yes, of course we know that it is much less likely that we would get 1,000 heads. And the closer we get to the bigger sample we get, the more likely it is to be an even distribution.
So I did some calculations on this, and do you know how unlikely it is to flip a coin 1,000 times and get 1,000 heads or 1,000 tails?
I don't even know how to start by giving you that number, John, but very, very,
So we
very
know,
unlikely.
yeah. So we know the chance is 1 in 2, yes, of heads or tails. Obviously, we can be pedantic about this and say that the coin might be slightly biased or weighted or whatever, but let's imagine that it is a 50-50 for argument's sake. So we know that it's 1 in 2. So the chances of flipping the coin twice and getting heads both times, to do that, you would do half times a half, which is a quarter. So the chance of that happening are 1 in 4, or a quarter, essentially. So we basically just need to keep doing that 1,000 times, a half times a half times a half. It's a very, very, very small number, Becky. Essentially, it is. I've written this down. Just let me double check it. It's a 1 in 10, and then 301 zeros after it, which is
Okay.
very, very small. And I asked AI to give me something that was comparatively small, and it came up with the chances of you picking up a particular grain of sand on Earth. So, if you were going for that particular grain of sand on Earth, out of all the grains of sand on Earth, and you picked it up, that's about the same chance of flipping a coin 1,000 times and getting heads every time, if it's a 50-50 chance. So we know that is a tiny, tiny, tiny chance. However, if you've done it 999 times, the chances of flipping the coin again 1,000th time and it being heads or tails is still 50-50. And it's just sort of counterintuitive, isn't it? And it's the sort of thing it takes you, it takes a little bit of getting your head round, really. But it's just the fact that the previous events don't influence the coming events, and we kind of expect that they do, because that's how we live as humans, isn't it? What happened before it affects what happens next.
Definitely. I think I was talking about roulette, wasn't I, last time, and black and red. And yeah, of course, over a series of time, you would expect to see an even number the more rolls of the wheel there were. But that still doesn't impact the next roll of the wheel.
No, which is why it isn't, mathematically it should be 50-50, but actually in terms of the, what happens in the real world, it isn't necessarily 50-50. And I suppose, as Filter Coffee says, the bigger the sample size, the closer it would get to that. But you still wouldn't actually expect it to be out of 1,000 coin flips, 500 times heads and 500 times tails, would you? Because it's just not how it works, is it?
I mean, I would be a millionaire.
Yeah, exactly. There's been lots and lots of experiments that have done this, actually. You can have a quick Google. I'm not going to go through them now, but you can have a quick Google and have a look at them, because lots of people have thought about this and actually tested it. So, it's interesting. And thank you, Filter Coffee, for your comment on that. But it's one of those counterintuitive things about probability, and probably one of the reasons, having talked about probability so much, given that this is a primary maths podcast, it's probably one of the reasons why it's not on the primary curriculum anymore. But it used to be.
Yeah,
it used to be when I started teaching. It was there.
Yeah, I remember teaching it.
Yeah, but
back in the day.
no longer. Of course, that doesn't mean that we can't talk about it with children and teach it now. It's just not on the curriculum. So that we'll put probability away for now. But I did think it was interesting.
Definitely. Talking of stats, though, John, you have some exciting stats to share from Spotify.
Well,
I think.
Talking of stats, and we did say, didn't we? One of my misuses of maths last week was about percentages and how they can be misleading when it comes to giving data and interpretations of that. However, I want you to totally forget that this week and completely believe all the percentages and the story that they tell. So Spotify, every year, if you use Spotify, we're not sponsored by Spotify, but if you use Spotify, you will know that they give a sort of roundup of your most listened to shows or songs or albums and things, how much you've used the app this year. Do you use Spotify, Becky,
I
particularly?
do, yes. Yeah,
So
I
you
do.
get this through. I won't ask you what your top listened album
I
was
haven't
this
looked at
year.
it yet, actually,
Oh,
John.
have you
So maybe
not?
I'll share it with you next.
Yeah.
It'll be
Okay.
something to do with musical theatre, I have no doubt.
Probably. Yeah, that sounds about right. I don't. I do have Spotify. It's not my primary listening medium. I'm still on vinyl. No, I use a different one. But when you have a podcast, if you do have a podcast, as we do, and you host it on Spotify, we also are on YouTube and Apple, just in case you wanted to listen to us on all three. They send you through the same sort of thing to tell you how your show's done this year. I had no idea of that because we only launched this show back in the summer. I think our first episode was in July, possibly end of June. And so I was very excited when somebody pointed out that you could get these stats. So we are we're I don't want to blow our own trumpet, Becky, but we're doing quite well. So we received 83% more shares. Sorry, let's get the stats right. Let's get them right. We received more shares than 83% of other shows, which I think
That's
is,
great.
yeah, impressive. We are listened to for longer, probably because we ramble on, but we're listened to for longer than 84% of other shows. So thank you, everybody, for listening. But this is the one that I particularly liked. We've got a 2025 instant hit show, according to Spotify Wrapped. I'm just reading it off there now. Our debut season was more popular than 89% of other shows. So that,
That's great.
that is good, isn't it? And thank you, everybody who has listened and made that happen. And we are a top 10 show for 100 fans out there. So again, thank you to all of those 100. Be nice if, the other 500 or 600 who regularly listen, would just commit a bit more and get us into their top 10s as well. It's interesting what people listen to as well as us. So it gives us a little bit of a background here. Now, I imagine, but I have no data to back this up, that most of the people who listen to us are in some way connected to education. You kind of
You'd think. Yeah.
intuitively. So, what other sorts of things do you think they listen to, Becky?
Okay, so we obviously focus on maths, so there might be some other shows that have a focus in a different area. I don't know if maybe teaching or just generally a different area of the curriculum, possibly.
Well, yeah. So there are some other. If you look at the podcast, there are some other teaching podcasts on there. But it was the audiobooks that were interesting to me. So the most listened to audiobook by our audience
Yeah.
is Lee Mack's autobiography, Mack the Life, which
Surprising.
surprising. In the top 5 of the most listened to audiobooks, there's only one teaching book, and that is Tom Bennett's Running the Room, The Teacher's Guide to Behaviour, which I totally understand. Yeah, at the moment,
Yeah,
it feels like
absolutely.
behaviour is a big topic, doesn't it?
Definitely.
So I haven't read that book actually, but maybe I should check it out. And then in 5th place, which I quite liked, was Bob Mortimer's The Satsuma Complex, which I have also read. Yeah.
I have just read that actually, just finished reading it.
Yeah, so I think our listeners have good tastes. But I don't want to spend too long bragging, but I just wanted to say, and I'm sure you do too, Becky, thank you to everybody who has tuned in this year, and please do continue to do so next year. And as ever, if you have enjoyed the show and you think you might know somebody else who might also like it, do share it with them. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's a real privilege to sit around talking about maths with you, John. So the fact
Not
that
just
people
maths, Becky, to be fair.
No,
but
true. But the fact that other people are listening and enjoying and sharing, more importantly, it's lovely. It's lovely to think that people are listening in, and some of them, of course, have taken part in the conversation. So it'd be great to have some more messages as well that we can talk about in future shows.
Absolutely. And it just goes to show, each week when you say, please share it with a colleague, people do. So, we really appreciate that. Speaking of which, just a quick plea, please. We would like to do a Christmas episode of the podcast. We're getting towards that point now. We would love your contributions for this, please. So, any Christmas maths of life that you notice on the run up to the big day. It could be, how much wrapping paper you've used in centimeters, meters, and kilometers. It could be a ratio of how long you need to cook the turkey for compared to the roast potatoes. It could be something on Becky's favorite topic of measurement. Anything that you spot, we would like to hear from. We'd also love to hear about your Christmas maths lesson stories as well. So if anything comes out of your Christmassy maths lessons, I'm sure some of those are going on. Chris maths lessons. I'm sure some of those are going on. And if you do need any quick last minute lesson ideas, have a quick look on Twinkle. We've got loads on there that can help
Plenty
you out
there.
if you need some Christmas maths ideas. But we would love to hear from you. Becky, you had a couple of ideas, didn't you, of maths of life sort of things that you might spot on the run up to Christmas?
Yeah, I think it's probably telling about me and the Christmas season that most of mine are around food, but I feel like we have conversations every year about the sizes of, well, I've said Quality Street, but obviously other chocolate providers are available. But the size of the tin, I've still got some very old Christmas decorations in a really big Quality Street tin from years and years ago. So every year I sort of
I
compare it.
walked into a supermarket the other day and they had the big stand of box. I mean, they're not tins, are they? They're plastic tubs
No,
now,
yeah, of
aren't they?
course.
At the front of the shop, and I was disgusted by the size of them. They're tiny. I
I
mean,
know.
I could easily just get through one of those in an evening by myself, Becky, without even feeling poorly at the end of it. So, yeah, what's going on
Absolutely.
there?
Yeah, so there's definitely some conversations around the weight of it, but also the ratio of different chocolates and why your favorite ones there's only ever two in there, and two between four doesn't ever work. So yeah, lots of things we might get to explore on our Christmas episode.
Absolutely. So please send those in. Again, primarymathspodcast@twinkle.co.uk, or just send us a DM or comment on any of the videos online. Now, getting on to some actual mathsy curriculum stuff, we'll just touch on that briefly, shall we? Santander last week published their report into the global study conducted across 10 countries about financial education. It's called The Currency of Learning. It's absolutely free. You can go and have a look on Google for that. I've just written an article which, by the time this podcast goes out on Friday, should be on Twinkle's website about it as well, if you want to see my further thoughts on it there. So they've basically asked the public about their views on financial education. Now, I don't know about you, Becky, but teaching in school, financial education came much more through PSHE, and PSHE was a lovely lesson to teach, but it was probably one that got squeezed at curriculum time more than anything else. Is that fair, or is that just me?
Yeah, no, that is definitely a reflection of my practice as well. I think, unfortunately, there is so much to cram in, isn't there, in a week in primary school, and things do fall off the edge, particularly this time of year, or lots of times of year when things come up. There's productions and trips and things, and I think, yeah, unfortunately, PSHE probably was one of those ones that sort of got
It's a real
shifted.
shame, because we know how important mental health and emotional well-being and just being a good citizen it is, and schools seem to have an increasingly large role to play in developing children in that way,
Hmm.
which is probably why the Curriculum and Assessment Review found that there should be a greater emphasis on citizenship in the new curriculum. And as part of that, they also mentioned financial education. Now, it seems that they are um, reflecting the zeitgeist of the general population's feelings about how important financial education is, because in this report, The Currency of Learning, the Santander found that from their international respondents, financial education finished just behind maths in terms of perceived importance. Now, I'm glad maths was still number
Yeah.
one, obviously, but I think it's fascinating that it was put above science and above history and geography uh, and all those sorts of things. Really, I mean, that's yeah, striking, really. And in the UK specifically, 95% of respondents ranked financial education as important.
Wow.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
and not surprising, I don't think. I think it's hard, isn't it? Because I think it's been something that's been talked about for a long time. And of course, it always takes education a little bit of time to catch up with these things. Research has to be done and things. But yeah, I think there's been a need for it for a while. So I'm glad it's being talked about.
Now, financial education gets talked about a lot in terms of maths, and I feel like it's very much a key stage two sort of topic. But it was when I was looking into this a little bit more, I found some research from Cambridge University that showed that money habits begin forming between the ages of 3 and 7. I mean, that's
Wow.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's from role playing in the shop area at school, or we had a shop and a restaurant kitchen thing in our children's play area at home and things as well.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that it begins so early. So I guess the question is, what does financial education look like in early years and key stage one, I suppose.
Yeah. I think there's so much pressure as well, isn't there, on teachers and educators and education to get these things right. But it's a whole other area that we maybe don't know what getting it right looks like yet.
No, no, it'll be interesting to see what the curriculum says about it. But I think it's going to stand more within citizenship than it is within maths. But from a maths point of view, I think what was interesting in the curriculum and assessment review was that it was made very clear that topics should be encountered first in maths and then in other areas of the curriculum. So when it comes to financial education, we would expect that, if we're talking about coins or notes, not that we use those much anymore, or digital forms of currency and things, that would come through in a maths lesson first before it's talked about in citizenship. So just, I suppose, if you happen to be a maths lead out there, it's just going to be worth keeping an eye out on what scheme your school, if you are using one, what scheme you're using for maths and what you're using for PSHE or citizenship, and making sure that those two things align in terms of when you're teaching the topic in maths and when you're teaching it in citizenship when it comes to financial education and in other areas of the curriculum as well, I suppose. So yeah, the other final thing that I'll say on this is that they did also speak to teachers particularly, and 49% of UK teachers felt confident in teaching financial education. So just over half don't feel confident in teaching
Mm.
it. And I understand that, again, probably because it's not a core subject and it's a rather niche part of the PSHE curriculum in some ways, I suppose. And we've already said that PSHE can be liable to being squeezed a little bit for time. But also 32%, only 32% of teachers found it easy to access resources, which is slightly more surprising, maybe.
Yeah, it's another thing where we're not quite keeping up, are we? With well, not we personally, but the education sphere isn't quite keeping up with the need, and it can be difficult when reports are coming out all the time. It's difficult to know where to read and where to look. So I think having too much to look at can sometimes be more overwhelming than not having enough as well. So that might factor into that too.
So my thoughts on it were, having read it, the sort of three takeaways that I had for it is that the earlier this can sort of be introduced, the better, by the sounds of it. So not leaving it to year 5 and year 6 to look at budgets and that sort of thing, but actually having an understanding that young children, as young as 3, according to the Cambridge University research, are already starting to form habits and opinions about money. So that obviously the earlier the better. I think the other thing that we touched on, having an integrated approach. So is it coming through maths? Is it just coming through citizenship? Is it coming through other areas of the curriculum? I think it needs to be looked at sort of cohesively, doesn't it? And clearly, teachers need some professional development in the area of financial education to go alongside that what they are teaching. Again, we don't do a lot of plugs on this show, but I will mention that I did do a teach meet on financial education, which, if you're a member of Twinkle, is absolutely free to access, and you can. So, if you are feeling that you would benefit from some CPD on financial education, go on the Teach Me area of the Twinkle website and have a look for financial education in there. And there's free Teach Me there. And we've also got lots of resources as well, haven't we, Becky, to support teachers with delivering financial education.
Yeah, we've worked alongside Santander to create a wealth of resources. So there is stuff out there. So searching for Santander on the website as well will help you find those.
Yep. So we can certainly help with the PD side of things, and we can help with the resources side of things. But in terms of the curriculum, it'll be interesting to see what comes next. So this is the part of the show now where we will reflect on my interview earlier this week with Patrick Renouf, who joined us from Switzerland. I said during his interview, I had to edit it out actually, that I thought he was our first international contributor. But actually, of course, our very first guest, Heidi, joined us from Malaysia, which
She
is,
did, yes.
very international. So, yeah, sorry, Patrick, you didn't quite make it into our first international guest, but you're up there in the top three. So, Patrick joined us to talk about his own experience developing as a teacher who had a traumatic sort of experience with maths at school himself, really, and carried that into his teaching career, certainly the early part of his teaching career, and yet has now gone on to become a maths specialist, teaching internationally and supporting teachers to become better maths teachers as well. So it was an interesting story. Patrick's a lovely guy, and it's well worth going back and having a listen to what he had to say if you haven't caught it already. But I'm just interested, Becky, as to what your sort of discussion points might be around that interview.
Yeah, lots of things come up in the interview. It's a lovely interview to listen to, actually, something a little bit different to the theme of recent episodes. But I think one of the main things that actually links to what we were just saying about financial education is that Patrick talked about the importance of good PD a couple of times, talked about that. And obviously he's been involved in that. And we talked about the coaching model, which I think is a fantastic way of not being so evaluative, but actually working together. But my concern is that teachers listening will be thinking, yeah, more PD in this area would be great, but I also need PD in financial education and English and French and so on. There are so many things to do as a primary school teacher, and it's just hard to know how we can meet the needs of all the training needs that are needed in the time given, and how we can maybe have a bit more joined up thinking. I think if there's a good pedagogical approach in maths, it probably is a good pedagogical approach in other subjects too. It's
Yeah,
just good teaching. But I
yeah.
don't think we always join up those dots.
No, I think you're right. And, particularly with maths, when we talk about teaching for mastery, there's nothing about teaching for mastery which is solely related to maths. Yes, maybe the five big ideas if you're looking at the NCTM's particular slant on teaching for mastery, but the actual pedagogical approach of teaching for mastery is just a broad pedagogical approach that sits within pretty much any domain within the curriculum. So you're right, Becky. It's wrong to think that, this is the approach I'm going to take for teaching maths. This is the approach I'm going to take for teaching English. This is the approach I'm going to take for teaching science. You could become, very compartmentalized, couldn't you, if you're not careful?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I've just recorded next week's interview with Mike Gardner. We're talking about oracy, and we're going to we've essentially done a walkthrough of a maths lesson of what oracy might look like in each part of the maths lesson. And it's a really nice practical interview. But as we were doing it, we were sort of saying, this doesn't just apply to maths. It applies to pretty much every subject that you teach. I think it's, when it comes to PD, you've got two sort of conflicting dynamics going on, haven't you, generally in schools? Because you've got the school's own needs in terms of the school improvement plan and the priorities for that year, and therefore what staff inset days and whole school training might look like. So you might have an English focus this year, and that might mean that your staff meetings are going to be English focused more than anything else. But you've also got your own professional development, haven't you, that you should be part of, hopefully part of your appraisal or your performance management. And that, I would say, is an opportunity to really try and prioritize what is it that you want to focus on this year. The answer, of course, is maths. But you could really dig down into what exactly it is that you want to further develop. And then, as you say, the pressure to try and do everything is too much. And we need to realise, don't we, that we can't do everything. So you've got your school priorities, you've got your own personal development priorities, and then other things probably, just need to go on the someday or sometime list, and not beat yourself up for not getting through everything. And also, as you say, Becky, recognise that you can have a more holistic approach to things.
Yeah, definitely. I also loved what Patrick was saying about concept-based inquiry. He talked about stop telling pupils the end of the movie before the start of the lesson and letting them find things out. And I think we're very good at doing that in some areas. If you think about investigative science, of course you would do that. You would start with a question and then find out the answer using various techniques. And I think, his idea of framing your learning intention as a question, just that tiny thing, I think could make quite a lot of difference to a maths lesson. We're not saying we're going to learn this, but we're going to find out the answer to this question. So I liked that.
Yeah, just igniting some curiosity. I wonder
Yeah.
what. I wonder why. And not necessarily saying what the learning objective is, although that might go against school policy. But I'm sure as a one-off, it's okay. There's definitely something in that, and I really love starting a lesson with a problem, and having an opportunity to think about that for a little while first, which I guess links into one of my takeaways for it, and my discussion points really. That Patrick talked about the learning pits, and that idea of it being okay to not know the answer immediately to something, and to
Yeah.
find something hard, but still be, willing to work through it and know that there is, a way through it somehow, but you've just got to work at it and find that path. And I think in maths, almost more than any other subject, that's really important, because that's what maths is, isn't it? It's, at its core, a lot of it is problem solving, and therefore you're not going to immediately know what to do. But
Yeah.
you've got strategies or habits, hopefully, that you can develop that will help you find a way through it. And if that means that for 30 minutes of your hour lesson, you really don't know what to do, that's okay. That feeling of, being out of your comfort zone is all right.
Yeah. We've talked a few times, haven't we, about the importance of struggle. I think you referenced it as well this week. And I think it's also okay as teachers for us to struggle a bit.
Mm.
You can't plan always the direction of the lesson, and it's okay not to always have the answer or an answer. And that's a good discussion point in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we would love to know your takeaways from the episode as well. So if you've got anything that you'd like to share, please do get in touch. We genuinely really do love hearing from you. But I think that's probably just about it for this episode, Becky. Thank you for listening, everybody. Shall we do it again next week?
Yeah, let's do it again. Hopefully talking about Christmas soon, John. We're nearly there.
We are.
Yeah, and if you enjoyed listening to today's show, please do share it with a colleague, and don't forget that a quick rating or review does help others stumble across the podcast as well.
Absolutely. I'll be back next Tuesday on the Primary Maths Podcast with an interview with Mike Gardner from the Maritime Academy Trust and the Oracy Shift, to walk through what oracy or oracy looks like in each part of a maths lesson. It's a really nice practical interview with lots to take away from that.
Looking forward to that, John. And I'll be back with John next Friday for another AfterMaths episode. So please do send in your thoughts and questions for that edition, and we can discuss them alongside our takeaways.
Great stuff. Thank you, Becky. And we will see you next time.
See you next time.